Hey, really sorry about this not being a what if again and being another filler video. It's just that season 2 ended pretty recently, so it felt like it was a good time to release this. My next video definitely will be a what if, and I promise not to deprive you of more of those. In case you're confused about what we're doing, it's really not that complicated. Basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be seeing how characters change from season 1 to season 2. So the first time you're going to be hearing me talk about these characters, it was actually in the past, right after season 1, and then I'm going to talk about them again based on what changes happened in them in season 2. To make it a bit easier, in the top right corner, I'm going to have it saying if I'm talking about them from season 1 or season 2. So in case you're ever confused on if I'm talking about this character from season 1 or season 2, just look at the top right and that will clear it up. Then before we actually get into the rankings, I feel like we should talk about what the rankings actually mean, because I feel like for a lot of people they're very different. So I'm just going to briefly go over what each tier means to me. F tier is you actively made my viewing experience worse. You were on the season and I did not have a good time watching you. D is I really don't care about you. I have no true opinion on you. You are whatever. C is I liked you, but I'm not exactly interested in seeing more of you. You were just kind of okay to me, and I don't really care to see more of you, but you were fine for what you were. B tier is I did decently enjoy your character, but I feel like they were lacking elements to make them more interesting or make them more likable. A tier is really full package. It's basically I enjoyed your character a lot for whatever reason it is. Whether you're a comedic relief, a good villain, good strategist, you get in there because you really made the season a lot more interesting to me, and I really couldn't imagine the season without you in it. And S tier is basically A tier, but that's kind of where the subjective part comes in, where my personal opinion starts to rank you a bit higher. And it also means to me you are such a good character that you could be placed in any season and you would make the season better because you are that good of a character. And with that out of the way, I guess let's start. Yeah. First up, we got Caleb. I'm really not that interested in him. He had a lot of potential, but he was just a throwaway first boot. And since I'm ranking purely on what happened and not the potential of the character, he ranks pretty low. Also, I'm not particularly interested in watching him next season, since I feel like he's gonna be something we've already seen before, either a classic male manipulator villain like Justin or Alejandro using his looks. In fact, it's possible he has the same reason as Justin in action, seeing as his elimination was pretty similar. Justin came back in action, he was like, nobody saw me for what I was, I'm so much more, and then he, does all that. Or I think it's possible that he gets Justin's merge treatment in action, where he becomes a joke since no one will take him seriously, and he feels like he's going insane because he's the only one who knows how strong he is. That's basically the same thing with Justin. And either way, I don't really care. Not that either of those are awful character things, but I've already seen them, and I was hoping we'd get something a bit different from Caleb, since his character is very similar to Justin and Alejandro's already, but unfortunately I'm thinking it's going to be about what I expected. Obviously there's a chance I'm wrong and next season he's giving a more interesting plot. In fact, I'm really hoping I'm wrong and that he goes up in my tier list after season 2, because I really want to like him, but as for now, he didn't make a strong impression on me, and I feel like he's just the worst versions of what we've already seen. So, unpopular opinion, and it's probably a bit harsh to some people, but he goes like very low D tier to me. He escapes F tier because, like I said earlier, F tier to me says that you were so bad that you made my viewing experience worse. And Caleb didn't make it worse, he just literally had no impact on me. Now again, keep in mind this is fully based on what he's done so far, and since he was the first boot, he's obviously not going to rank very high. No one really ranks really high if they're an early boot. But even if he does fall into the categories I said earlier next season, like he is a male manipulator, he is a joke character, I would still be willing to move him up a couple tiers if he does it well and he's entertaining, so there's still a chance for him. I am pleasantly surprised with the direction they took Caleb. I was kind of right at the beginning with him just being a male manipulator to Priya, just on a much smaller scale than we've seen with Alejandro and Justin. But come merge, they actually took Caleb's direction completely different, as he kind of became the Damien of the cast, being the only normal, good guy. And I think that's the right approach. Obviously I'll talk more about them later, but I did enjoy the funny characters, however, there were a lot already. And I doubt Caleb could have really shined among them if he was just another funny guy. It probably would have just made his character a weaker version of what we already were seeing. But they instead made him a really smart and mature guy just trying to play the game as honestly as he can. And unlike Alejandro or mainly Justin, where their looks were really their selling points of their characters and there wasn't a lot going on outside of that, Caleb was the opposite, where his looks never really felt like a crucial or big part of his character, especially when a lot more of the focus just went to how strong he was. I talk about this later with some other characters, but generally I'm not big on the being athletic as a personality trait, since we've already seen it a lot, but I think Caleb's was actually done perfectly since his athleticism was done to do things that we've never seen before. Now unfortunately, with all that said, I wasn't big on what was actually done with him, that being with the Priya and Caleb storyline. I've never been a fan of on and off relationships with the fights keep arising. I do think they are a good match, and in episode 6 is when I started to like them, but episode 10 where they fought again because Caleb aligned himself with Julia, I started to lose interest to them. Now I won't talk about all the issues of their relationship right now because I want to save some of that discussion for Priya, but just for the case of Caleb's discussion, I feel like their storyline dragged on a lot longer than it needed to. But like I started with, the approach the writers took to Caleb pleasantly surprised me, and I said in the past I was willing to move Caleb up a tier even if he matched my expectations. So for breaking my expectations, I definitely think he can climb up a bit and land himself around in the middle of B tier. Also, I really like his voice actor. Next up we have Axel, and unfortunately she's pretty similar to Caleb. Again, she's a really early boot, so she's just destined to rank pretty low like Caleb, but I also wasn't particularly a fan of what we saw from Axel's character so far. In my opinion, she's just parts of Joe and parts of Sean, but the part in those characters that I didn't like. I like Joe as a character because her hardened exterior is contrasted by her deep implication of not fitting her gender and feeling like an outsider in her own world. And I like Sean because of his funny, good-hearted moments. But the parts I dislike of Joe was her intensity that sometimes was completely over the top in a non-relatable way, and the parts of Sean I dislike are where he's obviously insane about zombies, and it didn't feel realistic for a teenager. And that's my opinion on Axel. She has the unrelatable bossy leadership of Joe and the completely insane out-of-touch personality of Sean. Now, she was clearly an early boot, and I'm pretty confident that these parts of her character were amplified so she could be reasonably voted out, especially since she had to be more crazy and more annoying than Ripper, which we'll get to later, but that's quite a task. So come next season, I think we'll see a bit more grounded version, maybe even a more open version of Axel. But again, as for now, she didn't really catch my interest. However, she did kick Ripper off a boat, so that's enough for me to put her in D tier over Caleb. Also, some of her lines are funny, so I'll give her that. Very unfortunately, I was sort of right about Axel. She didn't develop in any interesting ways as a character, just kind of remaining this very intense and crazy person. Which is fine, but I just really wanted to see something different with her. But she didn't have any real interesting connections, and everything I said about her character from season 1 still stands. But on to the big part of what she did this season, Ripper. I really don't know how to explain how I feel about this relationship. On one hand, it sucks, I hate it, it's forced, it came out of nowhere, and it was really not an enjoyable time to have my eyes on screen. But on the other hand, the thought behind Ripper's poem was kinda sweet, and I guess it was somewhat nice to see these two very closed off and brash people find love. However, everything I said about her character unfortunately still stands, and outside of Ripper, she had a very uneventful 7 episodes. So I don't really know if I move her up or down. I guess down just a little bit, just because she didn't do anything to really keep my interest, and the few good scenes she had just about drowned in the scenes of Ripper. Not enough to go into F tier, but now she's a lot like lower D tier to me. Next up is Nichelle, and this is becoming a very common theme, but yes, I do think she will be better next season. Yes, I do think she has potential to be a great character, but as for this season, she was a drag. Not as bad as the first 2 since she was a bit more grounded and had more funny lines, but her elimination episode honestly hurt. Not in a damn she's gone way, but in a finally she's gone way. And that's not really a fault of her character, but her failing so miserably at the challenge, and then referencing some old man doing all her stunts and then freaking out in the confessional, especially since up till that point she was enjoyable, but it felt like some serious character assassination to make her so pathetic and unrelatable. However, I will give this elimination some slack since unlike the other ones to just have early boots, this one will obviously be used next season to give her progression as a character. But as of right now, I'm essentially ranking these characters as if this was a one-off season, and this was the character's only appearance, and if this was the end of Nichelle, she'd be D for me. I will put her over Axel since she obviously just felt a bit more real, especially since her situation isn't uncommon for actors. I mean, it's typically a lot more normal in real life, not like old man freaking out frame, but you know, at least it's more grounded than what Axel was doing. Nichelle did nothing. It's really ironic for the first season ranking, as I said Nichelle seems like the one out of Caleb, Axel, and herself to have the most prominent storyline this season, and she actually had the least story of all of them. Literally all she did was come back to show off her newly acquired athleticism and then quit. And again, like I said for Caleb, I'll talk more about athleticism later with like Priya and Julia, but being strong isn't really a foundation for a character, and it's not really a worthwhile or interesting character trait, at least solely alone. I think a very easy way they could have made her more interesting is have her coach Damien in the pre-merge, since he's obviously not the strongest, but they complement each other really well, with Damien being smart and Nichelle being strong. Plus they already had a lot of scenes where they were together pre-merge, and neither of them are really doing a whole lot pre-merge, so it kinda seemed like a gimme. Also, that could have naturally led into the Damien and Julia rivalry, as Damien gets mad at her for eliminating Nichelle, which actually makes their fighting in Damien's elimination episode about the tablets have a better reason than just Julia not liking that Damien was choosing the same answers, which was a little forced. They didn't really go any directions with Nichelle, leaving her as nothing but a character that would just have a couple athletic scenes an episode. Now to be fair, Nichelle is, I believe, the second least represented person on this cast, meaning she had 3 episodes last season and then 5 this season, meaning she only had a total of 8 episodes across both seasons. And that's less episodes than everyone else except for Scary Girl, I believe, who we'll talk about in a bit. But for someone like Nichelle that only has 8 episodes, she really doesn't stand a chance of ranking very high anyways. But the fact that her character is really weak now, and I'd even say weaker than last season, she really does perfectly resemble D tier for me, as I have no true opinion about Nichelle. She didn't make my viewing experience bad, but she didn't give me anything to improve it. Scary Girl is someone I was really worried about going into this season, because she's someone that I thought was gonna be very one-note. Similar to a character like Izzy, who is enjoyable to watch, but she never really does anything different. She's very one-note. She's always the same, and that eventually made her kinda stagnant. And I was worried Scary Girl was just gonna be that, just a scary girl. And I was right. However, it was done just the right amount. Weirdly enough, unlike the other characters before this that got hurt by being eliminated so early, I think Scary Girl actually benefited from being an early elimination because she was a very enjoyable presence for the time she was here. She was really funny, and watching how the cats had to deal with her created some really iconic moments like her chasing down Damien with a jackhammer. And I think had she stayed much longer and kept doing the same things, I worry I might have lost interest. That being said, I am worried for my opinion on her after next season if she does get overexposed, but as of right now, I really enjoyed Scary Girl, and I think she hits a solid B for me. She would have obviously hit a bit higher if she had some more interesting character dynamics. It was kind of fun to watch everyone be afraid of her, but that's kind of the problem, is that everyone gave the same reaction, which was fear. But again, she was really strong for a character that wasn't in there too long, and because her character was already kind of a freak, her elimination made sense without having to make her act unlikable or get really weird, which definitely helps the final impression of her. And like I said for Nichelle earlier, but more extremely, Scary Girl only got 4 episodes last season and only 1 this season, making her the least represented character in the entire cast. But like I said for Scary Girl Season 1 ranking, I think less screen time actually benefits Scary Girl since she was able to keep her mystique without going dull from overexposure. And even though she was a first boot, I really loved what they did with her, making her try to act normal to make up for last season, but yet still ends up being really creepy. It was a really clever way to give her a reason to be eliminated without just taking the easy route of saying, yeah, she was really creepy last season, everyone already wanted her gone. Unfortunately though, because she only got 1 more episode, that really isn't enough for me to change her ranking. I will rank her a bit higher in B tier as opposed to just middle of B tier because it's cool that she got a new attire and a character direction. Also, all the references and future challenges to her were great to see. However, it's not enough to overtake Caleb, so she's still below him. Next up, we have Damien. And again, like Scary Girl, I think Damien having a short stay actually helps his ranking here, but it's not for Scary Girl's reasoning that he would have got repetitive. It's because now Damien has a really impressive resume as a character for someone who was only in like 5 episodes. I'll be honest in saying that I used to think characters like Damien, like this normal person like Bridget, were boring. These normal, not very clear personalities, but now I realize they're some of the best characters for the show. And it's for the simple reason that not only are they great for building other characters, but they're also the most relatable. Damien is great since even though he was kind of the DJ of the season, being afraid of everything, he wasn't like DJ being a coward over the little things. Damien was reasonably terrified of every life-threatening challenge, which not only made him relatable, but also gave him a plot that continued expanding during his time on the show. And let me make it very clear that for someone who stays in less than 6 episodes, having a solo plot alone is crazy. But also having a solo plot that was ever changing with him, at first just trying to adjust, then wanting to quit, and then finally gaining the confidence to play, that is insane to have a growing, changing story for someone who stayed so short. Also, he bounced off his entire team so well, bonding with the nerdy girls like Priya and Millie well while also holding the torch as being the only normal smart guy on the team. And I couldn't even begin to talk about how well him and Scary Girl played off each other. So for all of that, he would probably already be objectively a high B tier. But since this is my tier list and Damien is one of my personal favorites, he makes it to S tier. Again, had Damien stayed longer and let his fire start to burn out, he might have got moved lower, but it's the fact that Damien made such a strong impression in such a short amount of time that makes me fry for more of this character. The only downer is that he was eliminated in probably the worst episode all season with the... yeah, I don't even want to talk about it. But even then, I was still able to enjoy scenes with Damien in it. And if you, as a character, can make me enjoy scenes in an episode that's just a bunch of fart jokes, that means S tier to me. Damien went all over this season for me. I think overall, Damien didn't do great, and I honestly think I overestimated him last season. Because the charm that I liked about him last season was that he interacted in interesting and funny ways with most of the cast, but that was really lacking this season. He didn't really have many interesting connections, and when he did, they were with people we already saw him with last season, so they weren't new. Also, one of my least favorite types of people are people that are doormats, that let people walk over them with no self-respect. And that was heavily present to me with Damien in the Millie situation. She pushed you into a death trap and betrayed your trust as a friend. And he forgave her not even a full episode later because she said she was sorry. It wasn't even a good apology. It can be summarized to, my bad, I shouldn't have done that. If we were ranking Damien right after that episode, he would honestly move down to like B to me, because I really wasn't big on him in that moment. And he didn't really go up for the rest of the pre-merge because he didn't do anything. But once the merge hit, Damian hit his lovable charm again, and he got me to forgive him. To him winning invincibility and finding the immunity statue and having a rivalry with Julia, to just doing the smaller things of working with his sheep to get it through a door, Damian was a really rootable character post-merge that always made his plot, even if it was small, an enjoyable moment of the episode. It's really unfortunate that the writers never doubled down on Damian, because from everything I've seen online, which keep in mind isn't a lot because I was trying to avoid spoilers, but still, from what I've seen, everyone loves Damian, and if they went all in and made him the winner, I think everyone would rank the season pretty high. And if they were to do another season and Damian was in it, I would be excited, but at least for me, it wouldn't be as much anymore. In my opinion, they reached a peak with Damian this season. And even if there's another season with Damian, and even if he does win it, I don't know if it will be able to match the peak that they got this season. So given that he had very low lows pre-merge and very high highs post-merge, I think Damian kinda evens out. I do lower him a bit like the overall S tier, but not enough to actually move him down a tier or move his placement in the cast. Next up we have MK, and MK sucks for me because I had such high expectations for her as I watched. Because I thought pre-merge that she was going to be the main antagonist, and like Scarlet, but you know, not bad, she would be a stealthy under the radar villain. Now we'll talk about Julia more later, but just for this discussion, she fell a little short for me. Mainly because I already feel like I've seen a Julia done before. But I was excited to have MK as the villain because she would have been truly like no other villain we've ever seen on the show, using personal confessionals to mess with everyone, giving her the massive strategic edge knowing what everyone's doing, but also could have been combated by her not as great social skills as other villains. And I can say that had MK been the main villain, I think she could have very well made S tier for me. But since she wasn't the main villain and really didn't do a whole bunch, I don't think I can place her that high anymore. However, I still do love her character and she had really funny lines, so I'm gonna put her in top of B tier as of now. I am worried for her next season since I think she's gonna kinda just fade into the background since the opportunity for her to be the villain anymore is obviously squandered. I'm sure she'll hack some of her challenge again, which would be cool to see, but I don't know if I really see an opportunity to interact with the others in a meaningful way, which is a big part of character direction for me. Where do I begin with MK? She was perfect. A great character that was effortlessly funny and offered the most unique and creative things we've never seen from any other characters in the existence of the show. Then on top of the amazing way she cheated, she continued to get more development with Julia, and getting iconic moments like the punishment she received from Chris with her bear. My only minor complaint is that her and Julia became friends way too quickly. I'm not saying that they had to hate each other, but the fact that 90% of MK's confessionals were duoed with Julia was a bit much. I think they could have benefited from some build-up, like them not liking each other at first but then working together to cheat, and then they become besties. Also, I stand by what I said last season that MK should have been the main antagonist that season, because we'll talk about Julia a bit more later, but just know for now that I think she suffered a bit from overexposure, which could have been avoided if she wasn't the main antagonist for both seasons. Had MK been the main antagonist for last season, and had the showing we saw in this season, she would have very easily been in maybe my top 5 of every total drama character. She had everything. The funny moments, the character direction, the unique creativity that I've been talking about with everybody. But unfortunately, her first season was a bit weak, and even though her and Julia were amazing, she didn't really have anything else going on with anyone else. So she can't make it to the very top. However, she still moves up a lot from her amazing showing this season. And that makes it to the about maybe upper middle of S tier. Not enough to top Damian, but she's still very, very high. Maybe like my top 20 of all total drama characters ever. Next up we have Wayne and Raj. Rain and Raj were two characters I was extremely worried for when I first saw the cast, because I just thought they were going to be dumb bros and their matching outfits made me worry of the Katie and Sadia dynamic, but I couldn't have been more wrong about them. Sure, they are just kinda dumb bros, but they have a lot more going on than that. They're extremely wholesome. These characters have enough sweet moments together in this season to give me diabetes. To Wayne supporting Raj for being gay and being excited about his friend telling him about it, to them just being happy guys hugging each other and complimenting each other. They were so cute together, and they surprised me that they were kind of the team leaders. When I first saw the cast, I definitely thought that either Nichelle, Caleb, maybe even Bowie would have been their team leader. But Rain and Raj weren't just dumb bros. The hockey part of their characters were applied really well in challenges, where they were the ones telling their team how they should play, and most of the time they were the ones creating the plan their team won with. I just thought that was a very surprising part of their character, and I always love it when a character surprises me. And none of this is even touching on all their funny moments together. And all that together gets them in the A tier for me. I'll admit that it's a low A tier for me just because I think their characters still lack a certain level of independence from each other. I mean, they're way, way better than Katie and Sadie, but their characters just felt extremely reliant of each other, which I get is the point, but I would have liked to see some more differences between them. Rain and Raj are really complicated to explain. I think these characters maxed out their potential. The problem is their potential has a cap, and the cap is an S tier. What I mean by that is that these two are such lovable, wholesome, unbelievable unbelievably funny guys, and they had amazing moments this season with the pre-merge of them really hating cheating and going crazy about it, to them just having some of the best challenge moments. These two were so inexcusably lovable. But what I said I needed from them last season to move up was some differences between them. I just needed to see these two characters apart from each other, and we really only got that for a single episode. And their lack of differences is also the reason I'm still ranking them together. And I really wish I wouldn't have to, but I still do, because they are both too similar. And that's what I mean when I say this is their max, because for what they were, which was two friends, was perfect. But I didn't just want to see two friends. I wanted these characters to feel more different, but the difference between them is that Raj is gay and Wayne isn't. And them giving the win to Wayne this season just feels like a lame way to try to make him different from Raj, but it wasn't nearly enough. In my opinion, they definitely should have been separated pre-merge, and one of them should have been eliminated a bit earlier. It didn't have to be super early, but just at least more time apart from each other than just a single episode. It really hurts to do this because I really want to put these guys higher because they really were such a big highlight of this season, but there's only so much I can do for them. They remind me a lot of Z, where they lacked proper direction of story, but made up for it by being such a great comedic relief. But the difference between them and Z is that Z did feel a bit different, and I'll explain more later when I talk about Z, but the Hockey Bros are unfortunately not that new. Like I said last season, we've seen dumb characters. In fact, these two being dumb and having funny scenes wasn't what got them into A tier for me last season, it was their cute moments of them having such deep care for each other. And we did still have some of that this season, but it was nowhere to the same extent. Which is expected. It's not exactly like Raj can come out a second time, but it's just that their charm of their first season started to wear thin for me, as it didn't feel like they brought anything super new to the table. I don't want to move them down, since even though they were a bit of a constant, the constant was very good and they were enjoyable this season. But I was just really hoping I would be able to move them to S tier after this season, but unfortunately they kinda still just remain low A tier for me. Next up we have Ripper, and how much do I really need to say? F tier, bad, low, not good, don't like. Now I do think Ripper had potential, since I did kinda like him when he was just being an unaware idiot that was full of himself. He kinda reminded me of Max, just with the less cringe evil stuff. But he's F because of the fart gimmick. You know, as much as we shit on the Pakatu Island cast, and it's definitely not good, but at least we avoided having a character that was centered around bodily functions. I thought we were past this stage of Total Drama where they realized this type of character isn't enjoyable, but sadly I was very wrong. I can only hope that next season Ripper drops this part of his character, because again, if he was just a self-absorbed idiot, he could have actually ranked high for me, because he did have some funny lines, but for every one line he had that was funny, he farted 5 more times. And it's not even just the farting, but it's his comments that were just particularly gross and kind of ruined my experience. I never understood fart humor even as a child, so this character was a massive destruction for the characters of this season, and he goes very low F tier for me. Ripper did get better this season compared to his last. Like I said with Axel, even though the relationship was gross, it was kind of cute to see Ripper express his feelings and go out of his way to try and make her his girlfriend. Also, he cut down on the fart humor a lot. It was still there, but it was much better compared to last season. Which, like I said last season, was the main reason I disliked Ripper so much, as him being an arrogant idiot was pretty funny at times, but even though he was a lot better than season 1, it was nowhere near enough to make up for how awful he was in season 1. If I was ranking purely just on what he did season 2, he'd probably be like low C tier, but still accounting for the pain he caused me in season 1, he remains an F. He does move up a bit from like a low F to like a middle F for me, since he did have enjoyable moments that made me chuckle, but they were just outshadowed by his much worse moments. And him and Axel kissing was, yeah, it wasn't exactly top tier TV for me. Next up we have Z. Z was a walking highlight reel every single time he was on screen. He was really funny and had some stupidly ingenious scenes to watch, like him slurping down every gross thing in the eating challenge and then throwing up in milk, him trying to get everyone to vote out Chris, and him not telling everyone about having no leg and then asking why they didn't tell him they did have their legs. And that's another big part that I really liked about Z, was the way the show handled him being an amputee. I was really worried when I heard there was an amputee on the show, because typically when shows put characters like this, they're a sob story. And I'm not saying there's anything particularly wrong about that, it's just I've seen it so many times, and it almost ruins having that type of diversity, because their personalities are so centered around them being an amputee that they barely feel like a real person with a real personality, since every scene they're just talking about the amputee. But Z was normal, he was just a normal stoner dude that happened to have no leg. And that's the exact way that shows should be handling people like this, because it accomplishes exactly what it should do, normalizing and humanizing these people by putting the human first, and then just acknowledging the difference as a part of them. Z also gets a lot of points, since we've obviously seen the dumb guy character for the show, like, a lot. I probably couldn't even name all of them. Owen, Jeff, Tyler, Liming, Topher, Ripper, Raj, Rain. But what separates Z from all of those characters is that he isn't loud, he isn't in your face like all those other characters are, which to me makes his dumb humor a lot more funny, that he's so relaxed and unbothered by what happens and what he says. So this might be a little unpopular to put him this high, but I genuinely think Z is this good, and I'm putting him in S tier. Now, I don't think he overtakes Damien just because I think Damien is the full package of a good character, and also creates some really versatile dynamics with the other, which is the one place where Z is lacking, since he doesn't really have any unique dynamics of anyone. It's either they're bros or they're manipulating him. But still, a very strong character, really loved him, and I really hope he doesn't fall off next season. Z didn't really change much. Everything I said for him last season basically still applies here. He didn't have many unique connections with people, and he wasn't given a major storyline, but he makes up for those by just being so great. He didn't really have any big funny moments like he did season 1, as it just kinda came down to dumb confessionals. He didn't have the leg reveal moment, he didn't have the funny exit where he tried to vote out Chris. But to be fair, that was expected. You couldn't really match the amazingness of Z's first season as a pure comedic character. And even though he wasn't a part of many storylines, the one that he was a part of where he had to keep quiet about Caleb's intentions to spare Priya's feelings, did offer some funny moments to watch the lengths he'd go to just to keep quiet, and also just made him a bit more lovable that he struggled so much keeping a secret. But I do think he goes down. Not enough to move down to A tier, but I will say that this season did show that Z is a bit of a stagnant character, which is fine when the constant is a funny character all the time, but my favorites are typically characters with high variety. So he's just now much lower S, which is really just helped by his first season appearance. Again, we're like Ripper. If I was making this purely on season 2, he'd probably just be B tier, but his first season was so great that he's able to stay in S tier for me. Next up, we have Chase. Chase sucks. I hate him. I don't really hate him for the part that a lot of people do, which is his social media influencer personality. I don't like that for him, but that was the point. You weren't supposed to root for Chase as an annoying influencer, online challenge guy, which I somewhat respected because I thought they were going to do something different with him. Either just giving him a major role as a villain that was just kind of dumb and was doing everything to win for more followers or something dumb like that. But his only storyline was with Emma and them once dating. And I hate Chase in this storyline because he was so much like Dave. Obviously not exactly like Dave. Dave was way worse. But so many of Chase's confessionals were just him misinterpreting what Emma said to him to try and say they're gonna get back together, or just straight up saying they're gonna get back together. I mean, I'm probably wrong in saying this, but I'm genuinely not sure if he's had a single confessional that wasn't in some way about Emma. And I'll admit, some of these confessionals were funny, but when I say some, I mean like 4, and he had like 25. Honestly, the ratio is not in his favor. Honestly, might be really unpopular, but I'd rank him below Ripper, because at least Ripper made me chuckle a few times at his dumb confessionals. But the cost of liking some of Chase's confessionals was dealing with an annoying, not taking no as an answer character, which is so played out, so annoying, and that's not even touching on social media influencer, which I thought was going to be a creative take they were going to do something with, but it was nothing. It was just something around his character that made him more annoying. I really didn't enjoy him, and I don't know if I even want to see him in the next season, really. If he was an early boot, I wouldn't really mind. I do hope he stays just so he can get some redemption, because I don't want him to stay here at F, especially below Ripper. I hope he can go at least above Ripper next season, but it's not looking great for Chase. Chaser Rooney. Is there anything to talk about? There's nothing. He's the same character he was last season. The vlog intro bit was funny, but definitely not enough for me to change his rankings, so yeah, he's still near the bottom F for me, and so long, Chase. And next up we have Emma, and the only thing I could possibly hate more than a pathetic guy like Chase clawing at the chance to get his ex back without changing as a human is the stupid girl who would take him back. Now, Emma already being a part of the storyline of Chase that I dislike so much already kind of warrants her going at or below C tier, but it's not helped by the fact that I wasn't a big fan of her character. To me, she genuinely had very cringy lines, and they weren't exactly rootable weird, it was just weird. Some of them are funny, but it was really hit or miss, and she missed a lot. Most of them I either found myself having no reaction or laughing at her instead of with her, which is a shitty thing to admit, but it's the truth. I did like certain things about her character, like her aggressive nature. It was nice to see that again in a player since we haven't really got much of that since Courtney, but unfortunately it was only ever used in the Chase plotline, which again was very annoying to me. And the only other thing I liked about Emma was her alliance with Bowie, and I liked it a lot more because of Bowie than Emma. Now it hurts her to put her in F tier because I don't necessarily feel like she belongs there with Ripper and Chase, but it feels unjust to place her above or at the other people on this list. So she does go into F tier for now. Keep in mind, this is basically the tippy top of F tier. If she can even get some character growth next season, then I could definitely see her going up, because she does have potential to be a funny character, and some of her lines were funny. It's just her Chase plotline really hurts her, and her character wasn't the best. But if she can fix both of those things next season, she can definitely move up a couple tiers for me. And Emma, just like Chase, there's not much to talk about here for a season 2 appearance. She was an early boot and didn't really get a chance to do anything new. However, it was nice to see her break off from Chase with her clever plan to distract him, and the concept of her gut instincts being so terrible that they're just as powerful as the other team cheating in her elimination episode is really funny. So since she was already in the highest point of F, and she did have some redemption this season, albeit very little, I am willing to move her up to D tier. Unfortunately, it's just still like the very bottom of D. And this really sucks for Emma because I was actually starting to see the appeal of her. I was actually starting to enjoy her, but then she was an early boot. If Emma ever had a return, I could see it very possible for her to move up a couple tiers if she's done right. But for now, unfortunately, she's just bottom of D. Next up is Julia. I do like Julia as a villain, but the biggest issue is, again, she's already something I've seen. I really felt like with a new season, a unique villain playstyle is one of the biggest things I was looking for on my checklist, but Julia really does kind of just play like a Heather 2.0, creating alliances, winning individual immunities, manipulating dumber people like Z. Obviously, I'm not saying she's just Heather 2.0, she does have some unique layers to her, and it was a fun take to have her represent the phony Zen influencers, but as a villain, she didn't really give me anything to be too excited for. She didn't even do anything super crazy as a villain. Her most villainous moments were just little stuff like schoolyard bullying, calling them nicknames and such. However, she was the only person who brought any level of real actual drama to the show with real hatred, minus like Ripper and Bowie, which this season lacked a lot of before Julia took over as main antagonist, so I give Julia a lot of credit for that. Also, it was interesting to see how she won challenges, and her strategy, while definitely flawed in some ways, kept the merge interesting. So as a villain, she ranks fairly low for me, but when it comes to a character in this season, she offered a lot, and single-handedly made the merge interesting. So that's enough positives for me to give her an A tier. She is slightly below the Hockey Bros just because the Hockey Bros were bestest boys, so cute, I love them, their scenes were really adorable, they gave me something new and unique with Raj being gay, which again, like I said for Julia, I didn't really get anything super creative from her. I do worry for her next season though, because I don't think she'll be able to get as big of a role as she had this season, so she's definitely in contention to be ranked a bit lower if she doesn't diversify a bit. And she doesn't need a ton, even just her building a truly unique and interesting dynamic with someone would be enough for me to keep her this high. I'm going to try and keep this very short because Julia had a lot going on, and I could honestly make an entire video just talking about her. But I don't want her to eat up too much time in the video, so I'm going to try and talk very broadly about her. And what I'm broadly trying to say about Julia is that she was way too much. My very common complaint about the other characters is that they didn't have enough time to establish themselves as characters. And part of that, well, is obviously the 14 episode seasons, but it's also in large part to Julia and MK hogging so much screen time this season. Now you know my opinion on MK, so you can see that I did enjoy her and Julia as characters, obviously. They were the biggest characters of the cast, but the difference between her and MK is that MK always felt grounded. She never crossed a line of feeling like too much. But Julia did. She was drowning in content during the merge when she really did not need it. She already had a really strong first season and a good pre-merge this season where she was cheating with MK. She didn't need to then also have a merge where she eliminated MK, manipulated Caleb and Priya with their relationship, then took Caleb into an offer to steal his vote for the rest of the game, took Damien's idol, played Damien's idol. And this isn't even in mentioning that she won 3 challenges and came pretty close in 2 others. If she had just done like 2 of those things, I'd still really love Julia and she'd easily be an S tier of MK. But the fact that she did all of this, especially after last season where she was already doing a lot, it just makes it hard for me to really view her as a character anymore. Since to me, she just feels like a writer device now. Like anytime they needed someone to pull off an amazing move, Julia takes it and then ruins the chances for anyone else to have a spotlight. And not only is it stealing the spotlight, it also just makes the other characters look really dumb. Not only is she easily manipulating these characters, but they also continuously admit that they shouldn't trust her after last season, yet repeatedly do. It's like if Alejandro went into All-Stars and everybody admitted he was bad from last season in World Tour, but yet they still all fell for his tricks. Like if that happened, we would say they should know better after watching him in World Tour, just like with these characters, I'm saying they should know better after watching Julia last season. Now, with all of that being said, Julia is obviously the most iconic character on this cast, having some of the best moments across both seasons, and if she wasn't in these seasons, everything would have changed massively, which shows just how crucial her character was to the plot. All of those are amazing. And if it could have been left at just that, she would have been easy S. But casting her character aside and making her just feel like an inexcusable perfect villain in back-to-back seasons is just too much for me to ignore in this ranking. So she makes it to the very top of A tier. Keep in mind, it is the tippy top of A tier. And she is so close for me, but I just can't ignore those blaring issues of her not feeling like a character anymore, because they really hurt the merge. Next up is Millie. Millie is someone I wanted to like so much, and there were times I liked her. I thought Pre-Merger character was interesting because it was also kinda a Damien character where she commented on everyone else's weirdness. Also, her season-long plot was a really good concept, but I think the execution was lacking at some parts. First off, they held on revealing to Priya that Mila was bad-talking her family way too long. I was ready for it to happen like merge to Final 6, but after that I just kinda lost interest and I didn't really care anymore, since I was waiting way too long for what was honestly a very weak payoff. Second, the scene we got of Millie realizing that Priya was a good friend and she should stop taking notes wasn't as fleshed out as it should have been. It was like a 15-second confessional of Millie saying, yeah, I guess I should appreciate her more, and that was it. I really felt like this was the moment to have Millie connect this back to her character more, talking about how she struggled with the over-analysis of people, or even just talking about how she feels like she has no real friends because she treats them all like a study case, or that the friends she has are just like her but they're bad friends and Millie should surround herself around more people like Priya. There's a couple ways they could have taken this, but the way they went really just made Millie feel like a plot point more than a person actually coming to a discovery of the way they've been acting. And the biggest issue I have is the talk of the finale with Millie and Priya making up. It's not a bad speech, but I felt like what was said wasn't representative of what we saw. The main thing being that Millie takes back judging the people here, saying she was wrong to think she was better than the people here, but the issue is Millie is better than the people here. Is it really wrong for her to judge people like Ripper? Like Priya, whose parents trained her nonstop for a reality show that wasn't even going to certainly come back? Obviously, Millie pretending to be Priya's friend to get more info was wrong, and lying about it to Priya was also wrong, but neither of those were the key of the apology. I think Millie's apology either should have been much more specific to what happened, or they could have just made her character more pretentious at the beginning, since she really wasn't mean to anyone or believing that she was better, and it was like her notes were super critical. They were completely fair notes, judging the very objective wrongs about the people here. Her notes were basically Damien's confessionals, except she wrote them down. Also, I think overall her and Priya's friendship was fairly cringe. I did come around to it by Final 6, and them dressing up as a super alliance in Final 4, well, super nerdy, was a fun thing that truly represented their characters. Now, I know I just listed a lot of faults, but like I said earlier, her premise for a storyline was actually pretty solid, and she did have enjoyable moments. But unfortunately, I don't think I can really justify putting her higher than a B. However, she does go above Scary Girl, obviously due to just her having more screen time, and she did have a lot of plot this season. And like I said, with the Millie and Priya relationship, even though it took a while, I did kind of like them. They were kind of cute nerds. It did eventually kind of come around to me. So Millie pushed my favorite character into a death trap just to win a challenge. So watch as I grab her, and watch as I move her into F tier. This single scene ruined any likability I had for Millie before, because you just couldn't relate. When characters are in disputes, you as a viewer should be able to see both sides to create a complex argument. In my opinion, Millie should have pushed Damien down the 3-pointer and then herself down the 1-pointer. This works because 1, you can see Millie's reasoning since she isn't great at challenges and she wouldn't trust herself to get the 3 points, and you can still be on her side as a viewer while also being on Damien's side since his trust was broken by Millie so soon after he expressed such a deep trust in her. But Millie pushing Damien down that death trap is straight villainous and out of nowhere for Millie. Honestly, I would have a hard time believing villains would do that. Like, I couldn't see MK doing that to anyone in this season. Julia, probably, but the point is that Millie doing it is so out of character, even if she was just trying to do it to win. I get that the point they were going for is that she was sleep deprived from training so much, but that still doesn't give me a satisfying reason to be like, okay, I'm on Millie's side because she was sleep deprived from training too much. Also, last season her entire plot with Priya ended with her realizing that she needed to be a better friend and treat people better. So to have her drop all of that just after last season not only ruins her likability in this season, but it ruins all the build-up she did in the first season. Now, I won't put her below anyone in F tier. It is a fairly high F tier because I don't want to completely forget about her first season, which I did decently enjoy. But this decision by her assassinated Millie's likability in a way that I don't think is ever really going to be repaired for me. Next, we're going to talk about Priya. Now, you might be wondering why we're talking about her first since she was the winner, and that's because I want to end this on a high note with Bowie. So first, let's talk about Priya. I think she's overrated. Priya to me fell very flat as a character. The parts of her character that were unique were seen in other characters that in my opinion did it better. Wanted a nerd? Millie. Wanted a cringy line person? Emma. The only truly unique thing Priya brought was her extensive knowledge of the show and her impressive physical abilities. And the extensive knowledge was fun to see play out, like her sussing out that Chris was lying about the raft challenge being easy, and her in general just contributing to strategy, like inviting Julia into her alliance as a shield. But as for her physical abilities, they were cool, but unfortunately this is kind of more of an issue of total drama, but her skills are kind of seen by a lot of people during the show's course. Zoe, Sky, even this season there's Julia, so Priya being good physically is cool, but it's already been done and really shouldn't have been used as a defining trait for her. There is good to Priya, like I said with Millie, their friendship grew on me, and Priya did have some funny scenes like all of Final 6 where she was hallucinating a water bottle and was getting increasingly angry about it. And I wasn't a big fan of her training Millie, but it was somewhat sweet to watch Priya work so hard to help her friend. Also, watching her interact with people in general was just a fun train wreck sometimes, since she really sucks at defending herself, so when she got made fun of and had to defend herself, so it was a very enjoyable train wreck to watch that. And I'm struggling here since C tier is empty, and I feel like someone should be in it. However, I think Priya deserves a B tier. However, I am putting her after Millie, which I know very unpopular, I believe. I think a lot of people view Priya above Millie, but personally I think Millie had more unique stuff going on, and Priya is good, and she can definitely move up next season if we get something really creative and new of her, but as of right now, I'm really not that big on her. Priya is so unfortunate because I really wanted to like her, because I do like her character, but more importantly, I didn't want all of her screen time to have gone to waste. She got 2 full seasons with major plots in both of them, and I didn't want to believe that she ranks low, because that means that she would have just wasted a lot of screen time that could have gone to other characters. But unfortunately, I have to face the music and admit, she suffered a lot from me in this season, and that's mostly because of her plot. It was the same as last season. Character tries to get close with her for dubious reasons, but then eventually they like her, but then she finds out about said reasons and gets really mad, and then they make up. It's the exact same as last season, and it didn't offer anything really new. The only difference was seeing how Caleb reacted to his intentions being revealed, getting really competitive and trying to win, versus Millie, who kind of broke down. But that's more good for Caleb than it is for Priya, who acted the exact same as last season when it happened with Millie, going really crazy and getting really mad. Now, with that being said, I did enjoy Caleb and Priya as a couple this season. They do match pretty well, and bonding over their parents' high expectations of them was one of the best scenes in the entire season to me, because it felt very real. And for the first time this season, it actually felt like a true connection between these two happened, where most importantly, the viewer could relate. Was it a predictable story that we already saw literally just last season? Yes, but that didn't take away from the enjoyment until their story started to drag on. I was into their story until episode 11, where Caleb made a deal with Julia and they started fighting again. It was really unnecessary, for one, what I said about Julia earlier, but also just because we have already seen them fight, and that respark of their fighting so soon after the last fight made me feel like these two weren't really right for each other anymore, as P is just way too intense for Caleb's calm nature. And she also lost that charm of a superfan that I liked about her last season. She didn't have any more scenes where she was sussing out Chris or using really impressive strategy, and that kind of just made her another competitive chick, which we've seen on the show a lot already. This just all really hurts Priya in the rankings. Now, I don't want to bring her down too much because it isn't exactly her fault that she was used in the same way in both seasons. It's more of a writer's fault. But I still do feel I have to put some of the blame on her character, as she was the focus for both of those plotlines. And she goes from lower middle B to our newcomer, lone resident of C tier. And let me remind you that C tier isn't awful. It is that I like the character a little bit, but for someone like Priya, who got 2 full seasons with major plots in both of them, this ranking is bad. Someone who got as much screen time as Priya should have honestly, at the very least, been in high B tier, A tier, maybe even S tier. But she was really poorly handled this season, and it shows in a very unfortunate way. And last but not least, we have the king, the legend, Bowie. What an amazing character. I don't even know where to start with him. His strategy was so fun to watch, as he probably had the best strategy of anyone the entire season. Voting Caleb the biggest threat come merged, to then making a long-term alliance with Emma, to recognizing the Free Person alliance trying to swing Z, to collecting his own Free to get Z, to tricking Julia into working with him just to betray her last second, and then showing Priya and Millie's notes to go into the finale with them broken up. Also, obviously love his relationship with Raj and how it was both wholesome, but they also did the smart thing of holding off until the show was over, which is something that's been talked about a lot on the show, but it's never actually been rightfully done. And I also think I just like Bowie so much because once the merge hit, I think he was easily the most relatable person on the cast. So his trials and tribulations hit on a much more personal level, and when you saw him succeed, you were happy for him. I don't think Bowie is quite S tier just because he did have dynamics with people that weren't exactly unique. It was just dating Raj and friends of Emma, temporarily working with Julia at Final Four and being her rival any of her time in the season. He obviously had other connections outside of that, but none of them offered us something we haven't already seen, which again is fine, but I don't really get the same vibe from Bowie that I do Damien and Z, that they could be placed in any cast and they would make the season better. Not perfect, but better. Bowie's connections were a little reliant on the other half playing their part to make Bowie's position understandable, but Bowie is still a really great character to me and makes it to the very top of A tier. And if he has a strong showing next season, he could absolutely get into S tier for me. As usual, Bowie was great. He didn't really do anything new this season, as he was an early boot. He did have a couple good scenes with him and Raj and him reluctantly cheating with MK and Julia, and I don't care what anyone says, but him dancing to the right tiles in episode 4 is one of the most iconic scenes of the season to me. But again, he was an early boot, so he didn't really have enough content to move up, so he just kinda stays where he was last season for me. Frankly, I think it was the right call to eliminate him early if they didn't have any more plans for him, but we did a lot last season, and I'd rather have him come back this season and have a strong couple episodes and go, than for him to stay and drag out the season just so he can stay longer. But because Bowie kinda stayed where he was and Julia went up to the very top of A tier, this does mean that Julia ends up going above him. Even though Bowie himself didn't move in this ranking, Julia still overtook him, if that makes sense. And there we go, those are my rankings for both casts on their seasons. I don't really think I'm going to do a season review. I don't feel like that's necessary. There's already a lot of other great YouTubers doing those. I don't feel like my perspective is really going to be that much more interesting. I will just say that season 2 was lacking for me. I was definitely expecting a lot more than what we got, and it was a bit of a downer to me. It wasn't a terrible season. It was still pretty good, and first season was really, really good in my opinion. Definitely above the other 14 episode seasons we've seen, like Revenge of the Island and definitely Pakatu Island. It just can't be the 26 episode seasons. I really, really think Fresh TV needs to go back to the 26 episode seasons. Nothing is going to top those 26 episode seasons, because if you look at a lot of the characters in my tier list that rank low, most of the time it's just due to them not having enough screen time, and if they had more screen time like in a 26 episode season, they could have been benefited a lot. And like I said at the beginning, I'm sorry for this not being another what if. My next video is definitely going to be a what if. It just felt a good time to do this, and yeah, I'm glad you're still here. I'm glad you watched it. Bye.